joining us today. My name is Mina Bose. I'm the director of the Peter S. Kalikos Center for the Study of the American Presidency at Hofstra. And it is my great pleasure today to host a discussion with two noted political commentators, Maureen Dowd and William Kristol, on issues, parties, and the media, the 2008 election landscape. This discussion is part of Hofstra's year-long Educate 08 program series in preparation for our hosting of the third general election presidential debate focusing on American foreign policy on Wednesday, October 15, 2008. We're very pleased to have so many people here today, and I was asked to make a quick announcement. The turnout has been so great for this event and expected for others as well, so that next Wednesday's discussion with James Cardinal and Mary Madeline will also take place in the Playhouse, not in the Monroe Lecture Center Theater, and so we'll be announcing that online as well. Let me just briefly introduce our two speakers, and then we'll move right into the discussion. Maureen Dowd is a Pulitzer Prize winning columnist for the New York Times. And also one of Glamour's Women of the Year. There you go. She has written for the Times for many years. She started as a Metro reporter in 1983, and before that she worked for Time Magazine and the Washington Star. She has covered 4 presidential elections for the New York Times, and more than that. And she has been the White House correspondent as well. Bill Kristol is the founder and editor of the Weekly Standard, Washington-based. You've also probably seen him regularly commenting on Fox News Sunday and Fox News Channel. He's co-author of the best.
That's the fair and balanced.
He's co-author of the New York Times bestseller, The War Over Iraq. He also is a columnist for the New York Times. Previously, he has worked in government. He was chief of staff to Vice President Dan Quayle in the first Bush administration. And before that, he worked in the Department, I don't know what it's called, but anyway. He worked in the Department of Education for Secretary Bennett under President Reagan. He's also taught at the University of Pennsylvania and the Kennedy School of Government in Harvard. Please join me in welcoming both of them. About the election landscape, and it's 2 days after Pennsylvania. We've got 9 more nominating contests to go before the Democratic competitions end. How would you define the 2008 presidential landscape today for Democrats and then also for Republicans?
I think ladies go first, I guess. Obama has shown that it's a mistake to be too deferential to women who are on stage with him since after she clobbered him in the last debate. The most important thing about this election, it seems to me, is that it's the first in 56 years without an incumbent president or vice president on the ballot. That's been the pattern for all of our adult lives. Bush running for re-election or as vice president running to step up. That gives a certain shape to campaigns. One party is represented by an incumbent, and therefore there's a certain that incumbent president is always renominated. That incumbent vice president almost always has always been nominated to succeed the president, and therefore the elections become a referendum on the administration and power. Now, the most striking thing about this election is that that's not the case. Bush isn't running for re-election. The Constitution prevents a 3rd term, and he hasn't changed that. And Cheney isn't running to step up, much to the dismay of some of us who like it, but I suppose we're kind of 7% of the country, so it's not probably he wouldn't be the strongest nominee, I will agree. So, and the Republicans have nominated, in fact, someone fairly distant from the Bush administration in many ways, someone ran against Bush and is different with him on many things. In fact, all the Republican nominees, sort of amazingly, none of them had much to do with the Bush administration. Giuliani was mayor of New York, Romney was governor of Massachusetts, Huckabee governor of Arkansas, Thompson, former senator from Tennessee, none of them had any role in the Bush administration to speak of, and McCain, a senator who supported Bush on some important things, but different from him too. So the non-incumbent character of this race has meant that it's wide open. Both parties have had wide open primaries, unpredictable, like an open seat congressional race, if you want an analogy. And I think that's one reason people keep getting surprised that the thing hasn't gone the way it's supposed to go. The Republicans are supposed to nominate the person with the most money. They have every time in the last 40 years or so. In this case, Giuliani and Romney have spent McCain, and McCain nonetheless won. The Democrats, both parties in the past typically nominate the establishment choice, who beats back the sort of lesser-known challenger, the more exciting lesser-known challenger, the way Bush beat back McCain in 2000, or Mondale beat back Hart in 1984. In this case, on the Democratic side, Obama looks like he's going to win, so there will, in a sense, be upsets on both sides, and I think we'll end up with some unusual presidential race, and neither is the obvious kind of orthodox candidate, we might say, of his party.
Well, having been a former Shakespeare major in college, I tend to look at things from the point of view of a more personal rather than the math, which is why I keep thinking Hillary can win even though the math is against it, because she wants it more. And the person who wants it more has a fierce advantage. And so to me, you'd have to I've covered 7 presidential races, and I spent a year of my life on Michael Dukakis, and I would ask him things like, what's your idea of a really fun thing to do on an afternoon? And he would say black mulch. And I would say black mulch, and he would say I put black mulch in my tomato plants. And John Kerry, ordering Swiss cheese on a Philly cheesesteak. So if you've been through a lot, and Bob Dole, who just spent a year really looking like he was longing to get back to his treadmill and watch C-SPAN in his Watergate apartment. Grumpy, very grumpy, like he wanted to turn the hose on all of us. So if you've been through, had devoted a lot of these years, you're in a position to appreciate how amazing this race is. It just has every, dynamic, like the Anita Hill race, the Anita Hill controversy. It deals with issues of sex and gender and race, and it's this very incendiary thing. It's this psychic dentist drill going down into American culture, and we're learning things that we didn't know, and some uncomfortable things about ourselves. And it's just, there's so many things to write. I just feel like I'm never really catching up. The contest between the first, black man with a real chance of being president and a president who already thinks he was the black president, who's having this Lear-like meltdown, right in public view. And, the contest between Obama, who kind of has a more feminine management style, very collegial, and, kind of the more feminine candidate, the Chicago columnist had dubbed him a Bambi. And then Hillary, who is dubbed by her staffers the Terminator, and she's kind of the more macho one, so that flips all the gender things. So, to me, it's like this amazing once-in-a-lifetime race that I think will probably never be duplicated.
Well, both alluded now to the possibility of Senator Obama winning the nominations. I just pointed out one that Hillary could still prevail. And you've both written, I'm not going to pull up the quotations on the slides, but when I looked at your recent columns, Bill, you wrote a couple of weeks ago that Clinton will probably concede by the middle of May. And Maureen, you wrote about 2 weeks ago that Bill Clinton knows it's going down the drain and that Obama is the hot new thing. Now, do both of you stand by those assessments today?
Well, I think, as I was saying about Bill Clinton, everyone in politics is obsessed with this idea of what is going through Bill Clinton's head. Is he, subliminally trying to sabotage Hillary because, as Chelsea said, he's afraid she'll be a better president than he was? Or does he feel like he owes her and he just wants her to get the nomination, and then he's paid her back for all his past transgressions, but he doesn't really want her to be president? Or does he? So I called someone who worked for him very closely in his 8 years, and I said, what is the story? And this guy said he wants her to win with every fiber of his being, but it's about his mortality and his immortality. And his mortality is the part that he's not the fresh new thing anymore. Obama is. He was Secretariat. Now Obama, until this week, was Secretariat, the naturals. And his immortality in the sense that he needs Hillary to, lock in or improve his legacy. So, it's just an amazing thing to watch. I just can't rule the Clintons out because they're so shameless. They're trying to bring back in Florida and Michigan. And, Karl Rove has this great piece on the op-ed page of the Wall Street Journal today. And it was just eerie how much Hillary and Karl Rove think alike. And at some level, Democrats respect that. They respect her sucker punches that have kept her in the game.
Still, the odds are just overwhelming that Obama's going to win. He's ahead by enough in elected delegates. She's not going to catch her in pledged delegates. She may, it's conceivable she could catch her in popular vote, but even total popular vote, and there's a controversy over whether one includes Michigan, where he had taken himself off the ballot as they were requested to do by the party, and she didn't. And then Florida, where they agreed not to campaign, which so far at least the vote doesn't count for delegates. So even if it's even in the popular vote, he's comfortably ahead of delegates. And the superdelegates who will resolve this would like to resolve it for Obama, and that's the great unwritten, I think, or not so much written story. There's some notion that the superdelegates are pro-Clinton, they're Washington, D.C. establishment type. They don't much like the Clintons. They went through a rough 8 years from a Democratic point of view with the Clintons in the White House. They lost the Congress. And any White House, fairly or unfairly, annoys partisans for their own party. If a congressman wants to get a job for someone, they don't get the job. There are a lot of grievances with the Clintons. Obama, they don't know him that well. They worry that he could lose. But the truth is the Democrats will hold Congress very, very likely, both houses of Congress. McCain could, if he wins, could be a one-term president. And Democratic superdelegates, who were congressmen, senators, and Democratic national governors, former big shots, and Democratic National Committee members, want to hold the party together. And I think it's extremely unlikely that they would overturn what would be viewed as a clear Obama lead in delegates and probable lead in the popular vote to give it to Hillary and risk really infuriating millions of people who've come out to vote for Obama. So I think the safer course for the superdelegates is to ratify the choice of Obama. And they're eager to do so. They really wanted Obama to win Pennsylvania or come close enough that they could all come out and say, okay, fine, it's over. We now focus on the general election. They are now rooting for Obama to hold his lead in North Carolina and make Indiana close enough that the popular vote possibility for Hillary pretty much goes away. And then I think we could still see, so I will hold to my prediction on May 6th or maybe on May 20th, which I guess is what Oregon is. If Obama can just win one or two more states, he can put it away. Now, look, there's a 1 in 10, 1 in 20 chance that the wheels will just come off the Obama campaign. Hillary will rally in North Carolina, and if she wins everything, she can win. She really, I think, literally almost has to win everything now to win the nomination. I don't think that's totally impossible, but it's an awful long shot.
Bill is right that the Clintons are not popular in Washington establishment, and there's a guy I know who worked for Jimmy Carter who said that the Clintons are there when they need you, and their loyalty is perceived as going one way. And I talked to Carl Hulse, our congressional correspondent, yesterday, and he said nobody on Capitol Hill is for Hillary. They're just not that popular because, before and again now, they kind of subsume the party. They think they are the party, and then the party feels like, well, what about us?
Here's an unbelievable fact, just to confirm what Maureen's saying. I think something like 26 Democratic senators have endorsed one of their colleagues, either Clinton or Obama. I think it's 15 for Obama, 11 for Clinton. Now, Hillary Clinton has been in Washington since '93. She was First Lady. She's been elected senator since 2000. Obama came to the Senate only in 2004. It's really a pretty stunning fact. I'm not saying that maybe these senators are wrong. Maybe they're valuing the wrong thing. But it is no one would have predicted that the much more junior senator who has almost no Washington experience will be favored by more of his peers than Senator Clinton is. And I do think that's why ultimately it's still very hard for her to win, unless it would really require a sort of as I said, she'd have to come from behind and make North Carolina very close and win Indiana comfortably on May 6th. Maybe she will be able to, incidentally. I think it's foolish for Obama, my personal view. His campaign's asking me for that much advice, but this appearance of ducking debates now, there have been 23 debates. one way to take that is to say, oh, come on, there have been 23 debates, we don't need any more. The other way to say is if there will be 23 debates, if every other state in a sense got a debate before its primary, why don't North Carolina and Indiana get debates? Fresh issues have come up, fresh controversies emerge. We've seen that in the last few weeks. And I think it would be pretty effective if Hillary Clinton stumps through North Carolina and Indiana for the next 10 days, saying, hey, what's wrong with you people in North Carolina and Indiana? Why doesn't Obama have to make his case to you? What, are you supposed to just ratify the verdict of some people 10 weeks ago, the last time you won a big state primary? I mean, I think she does have that outside chance, and what she has shown is a willingness to fight pretty fiercely. I would say Democrats I've spoken to, I don't know if Maureen finds this too, it's one thing, no one begrudges her fighting on until she's kind of eliminated. I don't buy the argument that she's supposed to get out just because she's behind. That's ridiculous. You're allowed to keep fighting until you kind of the odds disappear. But the ferocity with which she's fighting, and especially that ad she put up in Pennsylvania just before the end of the primary there, where she showed the image of bin Laden, which for Democrats has sort of been a public and dirty trick, allegedly at least, since 2002, when they did it against Cleveland and Georgia. I mean, I'd say Democrats I know were a little shocked by that. There is some worry that Hillary is sort of willing to just bring everything down in her attempt to defeat Obama.
Also, you have to watch this week, Reverend Wright is probably much to the dismay of the Obama campaign, going on a full speaking jag. He's going to speak at the NAACP. He's going to speak in Washington at the Press Club on Monday. He's got a 2-part series with Bill Moyers, so that's probably not what Obama really wants right now.
Maureen, in your column yesterday, you ended with the Dr. Seuss reference, that it's time for Hillary to just go, go, go. Do you think that, whether she will or not, obviously she doesn't sound like she's ready to leave yet, but do you think it would be in the interest of the Democratic Party for her to concede Senator Obama at this point?
Well, I wasn't saying she should go, go, go. I was saying the Democrats might, sing that Dr. Seuss rhyme to her. Go on a bike, go on a cow, go on a, balloon, or go. But I kind of, I'm a journalist, so I want the battle to continue as long as possible. But I agree. John Stewart said to Obama the other night, he said, do you picture you at your inaugural and Hillary Clinton is still battling on? And that would be perfect for us if she was just kind of in her jammies in the White House when he arrived, to her event. Yeah, I don't think it does now. So.
What does either of you have a recommendation for what the Democrats should do about Florida and Michigan? Howard Dean probably deeply regrets now having decided to just punish the states in this way. I mean, if he had taken the Republican approach, he would have just halved the number of delegates and this wouldn't have been a problem. But he said no, if they voted early, they wouldn't be seated at the convention. These are two of the top electoral college vote-getting states. Florida is, I think, 4th in the country. So the Democrats can't win the White House and not carry at least one of these two critical states. What are they supposed to do now?
Well, let's see. If it's resolved, then they can cut a deal and split them 50-50, or Obama can even give the actual advantage of delegates to Clinton, because it won't be enough to overturn probably the advantage Obama will have. They're not going to literally vote, in my view, in late August at the Democratic Convention and have 0 delegates next to Michigan and Florida. That would be fairly risky, I would say, in terms of the signal it would send to people in Michigan and Florida for the general election. So I think that the way they can only resolve it once there's a nominee, or if there's not a nominee, then they are in a slightly nightmarish situation where those delegations could be the difference, for the balance of power. I really, as a conservative, I've got to say that I myself have been rooting for the race to go on forever, of course, the Democratic race. And encouraged Hillary a few weeks ago on Fox News Sunday to keep on fighting. And she shouldn't be deterred by these artificial deadlines, like the Democratic Convention. I mean, who decided that was the end of the race? A bunch of white males, you shouldn't. So she should, but it is, I would say, having said that, incidentally, just a lot of our Republican friends are overconfident now, I would say, that this race is doing great damage and that, somehow McCain's going to necessarily, there's plenty of time. They've mobilized a huge number of voters, the Democrats. They have a lot of natural advantages this year, and they will come, I think, despite the bitterness of the last few days and some of the last few weeks, I tend to think they'll still come together pretty effectively. They really want the White House. And, so I think if I were a Democrat or if I were inclined to support one of the Democrats, I wouldn't worry too much about the race so far, I don't think. And I think actually Obama will be a better candidate if he learns from this. And this is, for me, the big question for Obama. I was asked this the other day, I think, on TV, and said, is this better or worse for the Democrats to be going through this? And assuming Obama's the nominee, the answer depends entirely, in my view, on is he learning from his mistakes and his vulnerabilities? Is he correcting them? Or is he sort of stubbornly refusing to correct them? And I think there's some evidence of both, actually. He handled the Reverend Wright thing pretty well. That speech was effective. I mean, given that it was going to come out, he managed it probably reasonably well. The San Francisco comments about how bitter everyone was and clinging to guns and religion, guns and God, that wasn't handled quite as well. But look, all campaigns hit a lot of potholes, and all candidates make mistakes, and stuff comes out from their past, and it's a very good test of, they have to adjust. It's like good sports teams have to adjust at halftime. And I'd say that, for me, is the question about Obama. A tough primary can be very helpful to you if you learn to adjust. If you stagger through and don't really learn anything from it, then I think it's a problem for Obama. And for me, that's really, Maureen's actually spent more time with the Obama campaign and him personally than I have, but that's for me the question. Is he learning, and is he learning to adjust?
Also, I don't want it to end because another of my favorite things to watch is Howard Dean try and control Hillary, which is like watching Finland try and take nukes away from Russia. He has no chance to bring her in anywhere.
If it's not Howard Dean, then who, after June 3rd, after the caucuses in Montana and South Dakota, who's the person, is there a single person in the Democratic Party who can bring the party to some consensus before the convention?
Well, this is what's really funny, because in a way it's like Murder on the Orient Express, because the whole thing is coming down to this small number of people who could broker, and those all happen to be people that don't like Hillary Clinton for one reason or another. So Al Gore, doesn't like her because she ran for Senate when he was running for president and took away resources and White House attention that he felt should have rightfully been his. And also she took his job of vice president for 8 years, so he's not crazy about her. And Nancy Pelosi doesn't really like the Clintons because she battled with them on China, and she felt when she went to the White House that they didn't give her the proper respect. And who's the third? Oh, Jimmy Carter can't stand the Clintons. So all the super delegates who they talk about as brokering this are all people who really don't like the Clintons.
And Edwards, I'd say, is also out there as a possible major force.
Elizabeth Edwards, there's been talk that she would campaign with him.
Right.
Yeah, she doesn't like Obama because she feels he took her husband's chance to be the hot, cute candidate. So that could be
I would say generally this gets resolved. Let's assume the most normal distribution over the next 4, 5, 6, till June 3rd. Hillary does better than Obama, but Obama wins North Carolina and maybe Oregon, so he doesn't knock her out quite, but she never, the wheels don't come off his campaign. I think if that happens, he has 110 maybe pledged delegate lead on June 3rd. I think 50 superdelegates come out on June 4th for Obama. I don't know that Pelosi does it explicitly before. People who are their surrogates, their senior House members who everyone knows speaks to Pelosi, as the governor of Tennessee, people like that, who would be assumed to be sort of speaking for war. They all come out for Obama and end it. I don't think, contrary to desperate Republican hopes and wishes, that we go through June, July, and August with credentials fights and bitter exchanges, and the campaign goes on and on to the convention. I think the most likely outcome is that actually week of June 3rd resolution for Obama.
What does Senator Obama need to do to keep the wheels from coming off this campaign? That's under his control. I mean, you talked about how if this has been a learning experience for him, he's picked up some things from the problems in Pennsylvania, from the Reverend Wright comments, from his comments at the San Francisco fundraiser. What does he do now to try to regain that momentum that he had after Super Tuesday?
I mean, even on Super Tuesday, of course, Hillary won several major states. I mean, the great irony is Obama's mobilized thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of young people. He's energized. He's got 1.6 million donors, unprecedented. It's all genuinely impressive, awfully impressive. The truth is, if this were being resolved only by primaries, the Democratic nomination was by primaries and not by caucuses, Clinton would be ahead and would in fact be the nominee. So I would therefore say, before answering the Obama question, she is not getting enough credit, actually. I mean, she has been a good candidate, actually. She's not a graceful candidate the way he is. She's not a natural, as Maureen said, which he is. But she is a tough, determined, disciplined candidate who, figures out what messages work and hammers away at them. And I actually have come to respect her more in the course of the campaign. I mean, I really think and people keep saying, well, she's turning out all these people. Well, that can't quite be right? Because she's gotten almost as many votes. They've each gotten about 16 million votes. So she's turning out a lot of people too, And I think, therefore, it's not entirely Obama's. It's not as if Obama's running a horrible campaign. She's a formidable opponent. She's a little more, she had that experience she had in Arkansas, and then I'd say in New York, upstate New York. Dealing a little bit maybe out here on the island, probably more upstate. Really speaking to middle class, working class voters who were not, happy with their lot, economically facing tough times. We all made fun of that listening tour she went on in 1999, 2000. It probably helped her, actually. And, one of Obama's problems, he's a very gifted guy, but one of his problems is he was elected to the state senate at the University of Chicago State Senate District, which is 90% Democratic. It's a combination of African Americans and the University of Chicago. And then won in 2004 in the Senate, lost a congressional race, incidentally, a primary in 2000, it was Bobby Rush. Won the Senate race in 2004 against a non-viable Republican. He doesn't have the depth of political experience she has in adjusting, making arguments, learning from what she or he are hearing from voters. And that is useful for practicing politicians. And I do think he should be a little more humble, maybe acknowledge that he said a couple of things he wishes he hadn't said, do a kind of listening tour type thing instead of giving speeches. It's exciting to see him give a speech to 5,000 people. I've been in a few campaigns. It's unbelievable that he's doing that. I mean, people do not understand in a way how we would work hard to get 700, this is 600 people, and that's a good crowd, and most politicians are very happy to give speeches to 600 people. Obama's getting thousands, 25,000 in medium-sized and small cities. It's genuinely extraordinary. But what I might do for the next 10 days is actually give up on the big speeches and do a sort of little more of a listening tour type approach.
Yeah, I think from the beginning the dynamic with Obama has been, is he JFK or is he Adlai Stevenson? And he has that cool, detached, very appealing JFK thing, but JFK knew when to turn on the heat, or vigor as he would call it, and also he had two of the most ruthless people in the history of American politics, his brother and his father. So he could rise above it. Obama is surrounded by David Axelrod, who's like one of the nicest political consultants I've ever met. They keep saying they're from Chicago. But Obama is very uneven. He will draw a crowd of 35,000 and give a soaring speech, but then, when the moment comes to I used to cover tennis, and it's very much like tennis. It's like he'll get to deuce, and then when the moment comes to slam the ball over and match point, he pulls back. He stays at deuce or chokes. And that's happened 3 or 4 times, and that's the dynamic that the Democrats are worried about. And the thing with Adlai Stevenson was he just radiated this kind of passive-aggressive, egghead, professorial, a little bit weak quality, and that he's got to pull out of that. He's just, the American people are not going to elect someone that they don't think is tough. They're not. It doesn't matter how beautifully he speaks.
Well, in last week's debate in Philadelphia, ABC News commentators got a lot of criticism for spending about the first 40 minutes or so on the lapel pin issue, the Hillary Clinton's memories or incorrect memories of what happened in Bosnia, and then Senator Obama's comments in San Francisco. Was the debate attention, has the media coverage of these issues been excessive?
Well, I have a different attitude about that debate. I felt like I really learned something about Obama in that debate. They were pressing him, and he completely folded. And he could have really done some amazing things with that debate. The flag pin issue to me is a real issue. Of course he doesn't have to wear a flag pin. Of course that doesn't signify how patriotic he is, but he knows it's in people's heads. You know, he made the mistake of the bitter comment, which made voters in Pennsylvania feel like they just fell off an apple cart. So he'd been practicing a patriotism speech, which he put on hold because of the bitterness things. He thought it would sound too defensive. So he had it in his head. So when that voter said, why don't you wear a flag pin? He could have knocked that out of the park. He could have just said, I don't have to wear a flag pin to prove I love this country. This is why I love this country. And instead, he was very kind of defensive and annoyed at the question. And, you know, I just think it was, you know, we were saying before, I don't think it's Hillary's experience in the Senate or on the job that gives her an advantage over him. It's her experience in campaigning. And he has never understood the conventions of campaigning and the mythic elements of it and the debates or jousts. And you don't have to be nasty in a debate, but you do have to somehow, like Reagan did, kind of dominate and make it clear that your opponent is not as strong as you are. And you miss those opportunities.
But the flag pin thing is interesting, I guess. And I've never, since I left government, and even mostly when I was in government, worn a flag pin. I remember a week or two after 9/11, someone offered me one on some TV show, which was a TV appearance, and I don't know, I didn't really know why. I don't think I would. I'm not in government. I'm not making some kind of statement. But what got Obama in trouble was his statement about why he had stopped wearing one. That, you know, he thought it was sort of a false patriotism for those who were wearing it. Now that may or may not be true in some cases. But if you say that, people who are still wearing their flag pin are going to be a little bit, or respect those who are going to be a little taken aback. And then I think you have to answer the question. I think Maureen's right. It's not a very hard question to answer. Obama's a perfectly intelligent guy. He can give a nice answer about patriotism and how there are patriots wearing flag pins and patriots not wearing flag pins, people he respects, and people who work hard for them. You know, it's very easy to give that answer.
It's the embodiment of the American dream. There should be a simple way to just respect people who don't know him. He's new on the scene, to explain that he relates to their concerns, and that's where he's kind of falling down.
The other things, I was in the Bush-Quayle administration in the 92 re-elect, and Bush, what was the most memorable moment in which everyone decided Bush lost the election for good and just embarrassed himself? When he looked at his watch in 92, in the debate in 92. Now, the reason he looked at his watch is that I think it followed a really idiotic question. One of these three debates is usually, I don't know if yours here at Hofstra will be, but one of these three debates, you don't have the town hall yet. Good. They should do away with the town hall, in my opinion. Anyway, so some long-haired kid stood up. What are you going to do for us? Or what? Some kind of, or it wasn't even quite that. Anyway, it was some sort of silly question, I think, for the presidential candidates. But
it was a woman, and she wanted. It was one of these relating questions, and it was about what he was going to do for the middle class or something.
But it was more vague. Anyway, whatever. I mean, the point is, it's a democracy, and you're running for president, and people like us aren't running for anything, and we can choose to write about what we not answer questions we want, I suppose, and have scorn for certain kinds of issues and choose not to discuss them. If you're running for president and a voter asks you something, you have to treat it respectfully and try to give it an answer, or turn the question around and answer what you think is sort of behind the question, or answer something related to the question. And Bush got clobbered in 92 for his apparent just disdain for people's concerns at a time when there had been a recession. We were coming out of it, but it still felt like a recession, and other people had other concerns about the country, healthcare and the like. And it wasn't inappropriate for people to think at that time that, gee, if Bush can't answer that question and is looking at his watch and his aspiration, an hour and a half isn't that long to have a debate after all. People did have the sense that Bush was kind of almost contemptuous of, he liked being president, he liked doing foreign policy, but what about normal middle-class concerns? And I think, and I would just say, for all the people who are complaining about those same people didn't complain much when Bush got asked that, and when Bush got pilloried for looking at his watch, and I think it's sort of analogous.
But this is what's so fascinating, because Bush Sr., I covered his White House, and the reason he didn't like debates is because he didn't talk well, and he knew that wasn't a skill he had. And so, he was very frustrated with debates. But in the case of Obama, that's what's so weird about it, because he talks well, and he makes a great presentation. So he doesn't like them for a totally different reason, which is he kind of disdains the culture of sound bites, and he didn't put any sound bites in his race speech intentionally. And, you know, he just doesn't want to kind of do what you have to do in a debate. But, you know, he could do it. He's smart enough and eloquent enough to do it. Bush Sr. knew he couldn't do it, and so he would get frustrated.
Well, not to belabor this point, but if we look ahead to the general election campaign, would the Reverend Wright comments, there's an ad that's airing in North Carolina now that's using has used those comments and linked Senator Obama, has been a member of this church for more than 20 years. The flag pin issue, could these be significant issues to hurt Obama's electability in the fall? I mean, does Senator Clinton have a case to make that?
I think that definitely, and I don't think he yet understands how significant. I mean, to me, he thinks probably you can't run this kind of campaign again, and Bill would know, but to me, we're getting back into the Dukakis, you know, the campaign run against Dukakis. He's too liberal, he's not patriotic enough, you know, Pledge of Allegiance, and Willie Horton, in this case, in the Willie Horton role as Reverend Wright, which isn't a fair comparison, but the angry black man, you know, who will take over somehow. Is that your campaign, the increment?
I mean, it's unclear how there's a sort of liberal mythology that the only way Republicans can get elected is by, some of these symbolic issues. That if voters really voted on real issues, somehow they would necessarily vote for Democrats, but that presumes, of course, the Democratic. It's a mythology that's shared by somewhere between 45 and 55% of the electorate. But anyway, there's a reasonable debate, of course, about whose policies are better for the country. But I do think the symbolic stuff has hurt the Democrats. Michael Malone dates it back to the moment when somehow the Democrats stopped being the party of the common man, the party of Truman especially. And Kennedy was a wealthy guy, but he was good at projecting that image. But certainly Humphrey, Carter in his own way, actually, as a candidate at least in '76, and became the party of sort of upscale people who looked down at the common man and thought they needed to be educated out of their bigotry, and educated out of their parochialism, and educated out of their simple-minded patriotism and all of that. Fair or unfair, there's no question that over 20, 25 years, that's become a problem for Democratic presidential candidates. It hurt Dukakis in '88, it hurt Gore in 2000, it hurt Kerry in 2004, and it's just a fact that since 1968, the two Democratic presidential candidates who have won were Southern governors who ran as moderates, took on the left wing of their party, and were pretty good at being or appearing to be populist, and certainly came from modest roots. Now, what's funny about Obama is in some ways he is from he's less wealthy than Hillary Clinton. He is from modest and complicated roots.
And he just finished paying off his student loans a few years ago.
Right. That part, I think they should cool it off. She's a $300,000 a year lawyer, and he has a senator's salary, and I don't know how much sympathy there is that they've chosen to delay paying off their student loans for an extra 10 years or whatever. But anyway, I do think the cultural stuff is important, and now McCain is not a cultural war type politician. But of course, Bush in '88 wasn't either. But I guess that would be, if I were a Democrat, the scary analogy would be '88, where Bush was behind a lot of Dukakis. We all kind of ridicule Dukakis these days as having run that campaign, but he looked strong. I think you were probably right, he looked pretty strong.
He didn't look strong to me, but there was a time when the press corps seemed to think he was strong.
In spring, early summer of '88, and Bush came from behind, and Bush made up 20-plus points against Dukakis. Now, Bush was willing to run. He ran an interesting campaign. I went back and read a little about it the other day. I mean, he ran as a kinder, gentler version of Reagan. People forget how he did distance himself from Reagan somewhat, as McCain in some ways is distancing himself from Bush. He did a kinder, gentler speech when he went to the flag factory. I was with him. So the whole flag thing. No, but he did kind of gently. Yeah. But he also was very tough on Dukakis on the flag thing.
And it was about the Harvard elitist boutique.
Right.
That's what it was about.
I mean, all I'm saying is that Bush was able to combine in '88, it's just, again, this matter of political tactics, sort of clever combination, I would say, of being a little more moderate than Reagan on substance, but being very tough on Dukakis tactically in terms of the elitism and out of touch and Harvard boutique and all that stuff. And so the question is, could you do that again in a sense this time? Could McCain be acceptable to independence in ways that Bush isn't? Because he is different from Bush in lots of ways, on substance, on issues ranging from global warming to torture, to a lot of several other issues at least. So McCain is more acceptable than Bush, and yet McCain or other Republicans try to make Obama relatively unacceptable. I think that's the obvious Republican campaign script. I don't know if it's going to work or not. Generally speaking, I'm dubious that you can just repeat old campaigns, and I don't think they would be wise to try to do that. But Obama has given, Democrats I've spoken to are worried that Obama is opening this door wider than they would like, is the way I would put it at this point. I wouldn't say that it's that wide open yet, but there's enough there that you can construct a narrative that people will be worried that Obama isn't. The in touch stuff, being in touch with the middle class, I'm not so sure that's such a huge problem. I think Maureen's right, it's the toughness. We could have an election in which the economy is the number one issue, and no one's going to forget that we're electing a commander-in-chief. No one's going to forget that we have soldiers fighting. No one's going to forget that Iran wants nuclear weapons. And you can differ on what the right combination of diplomacy and threats of force and, economic sanctions and allies and all that stuff. You can differ on the substance, but no one's going to, I don't think the majority of the American public, they would prefer a president who is tough enough to deal with these threats. And I think, would be the question for Obama.
We were talking earlier about the research by the political scientist Sam Popkin about low information signals. This is a column that Joe Klein has in Time Magazine this week. And so it sounds like both of you were saying that Senator Obama needs to get some of these low information signals across, these messages that he can connect with the American public in some way, or that he's, I don't want to say trustworthy necessarily. It's not as much a matter of trust, but of confidence in him.
Well, as a senator, he loves to be surrounded by academic experts, and he's surrounded by a bunch of egghead academic experts in his campaign, and the low information signals that he's sending out are coming from the University of Chicago Faculty Club. And that's why it's not working with ethnic, working class whites in some of these states. And he's just, the hilarious thing to me is to watch him, he's lost 5 pounds on the campaign, which I think is the first time in history a candidate has ever lost weight. And he has been trying to stuff himself with food in Pennsylvania, and he eats waffles, and he goes to another diner and eats pancakes, and then he goes to a cheesesteak place and eats cheesesteak. But it's clear that it's just so hard for him to do. And I asked Jeff Zeleny, our reporter, what he usually ate, when he was in the Senate, and he eats like organic scrambled egg whites. So, he's trying, but the trouble is the more he tries, the more it just, as Stephen Colbert said, Hillary just knows how to condescend better.
Well, if Hillary Clinton does not win the Democratic nomination, do you see her as a likely presidential candidate in 2012 or even 2016?
I don't know. I just, I think that then we're going to get into, I think she would then want to be vice president, and that will be a whole nother battle, because Obama does not want her to be vice president. He doesn't like her because of how she's conducted the campaign, and I think he thinks it would ruin his fresh approach. And but I think we're going to have to watch that battle played out too. I don't know. I'm not sure. What do you think?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, Maureen's at the beginning, she's studying Shakespeare, and she reads this through the lens a little bit of the drama and the poetry of the campaign, which does capture very well. And I guess I studied political science, so I regarded it a little more through the sort of structures of the campaign. And boy, structurally, if you step back, one candidate gets, let's say, by the end of the whole thing, 19 million votes, and the other's got 18 million votes in the Democratic nomination, and they're both healthy, and they're not from the same state. There's no reason that shouldn't be the ticket. I mean, just conceptually, it's sort of hard to understand why exactly we're not going to end up, I think, with an Obama-Clinton ticket. And I'm not so sure it's not a pretty strong ticket. I mean, presumably all the disaffected Clinton voters who might desert Obama are less likely to desert Obama if Clinton's on the ticket. And everyone then says, well, does she want to be vice president? Well, I don't know. It's not such a bad job. I work
She
for
already
one.
has been.
Well, he's the problem. I mean, I think Obama-Clinton's a fine ticket. It's like Bill hanging around, a former president of the United States tagging along is a little weird. I mean, and plus he's a little out of control, as we've seen in the last few days. So, Obama doesn't probably prefer other people to be his vice presidential running mate, but there's a certain logic, I would say. And it's going to be hard for him to avoid at least sort of seeming to offer to her. I mean, it's just a suggestion at least. And if he has to pretend to offer to her, then he sort of has to offer to her. And if he has to offer to her, she might take it. This is how tragedies happen, I think.
Do you know, just Clinton would be willing to accept a second spot on the ticket, would that be more appealing to her than, say, returning to the Senate and perhaps having a chance of being a majority leader, where there's been some talk that she might take that one?
I know her very slightly, and I said, no, really, and this is a personal decision. I mean, I don't know really what would be in her mind and what would be in her subconscious and all that. I think if the problem with her, I used to think, she'll become majority leader in 2 or 4 years. I think she must be a little shocked, though, by the fact that the majority of her colleagues, or plurality of her colleagues, have endorsed Obama, which must make her wonder, well, I don't know, why am I so certain that I'll be majority leader? The media thinks she's famous and she should be majority leader, but we've seen this before where senators are perfectly capable of electing someone they like as their leader instead of the person the media thinks is more, is more suited to it. So she may decide that, in fact, look, being the first woman vice president, that's pretty impressive. And if they were to run and lose and she were to do a good job as the vice presidential nominee, let's assume she did find in her debate that Obama lost to McCain in his debates and Obama lost them in the election, then she probably would be the front runner for 2012. So I used to think it was out of the question. It was just so odd, first African-American, first woman. It would be kind of unusual. But it's been such an unusual year, as Maureen said, maybe it will culminate in this very unusual ticket.
Well, does either of you see any other women presidential candidates for either the Democratic or Republican Party in the future? Who would they be?
I think that the women around Obama are really interesting. He's got some really sort of appealing and classy female governors who have Janet Napolitano and the Kansas one. Yeah, and then she's a Senator Claire McCaskill, and it's a different kind of woman politician. It's not sort of the old style where everything is focused around the choice issue. They're a very interesting group of women around him.
I mean, Condoleezza Rice was the second woman Secretary of State, and if she goes back to California and runs for governor, succeeds Schwarzenegger in 2010, which I think she would be, and then got a couple of years, or 4 or 5 years of domestic policy experience. She's still a young woman. She'd be a pretty formidable candidate, I think, 4 or 8 years from now. We're going to say one thing. I was just thinking, I mentioned debates, and I guess this is literally where the debate's going to be?
Well, in the Hofstra University.
Oh, not here.
Not
we don't have the honor of sitting exactly where Obama and McCain are going to sit. This year, one thing, if it's Obama, one thing that occurs to me is in the past, I'd say the past several cycles, the debates have been exciting. Obviously, it's great that you're hosting one, and they've made some difference, but the truth is they haven't really changed. Maybe in 2000 or so close. And mostly, political science research shows, these debates, people have made up their minds mostly by the time of the debates. 95% of the people, 92% probably, the people watching the debates were rooting for one guy or the other. They weren't really open-minded in watching it. I think this year will be different. There are going to be a lot of voters who are uncertain about Obama. He's inexperienced. He's relatively unknown. Can you take the risk on him? On the other hand, there are a lot of voters, the same voters who will be uncertain about McCain. Is he too old? Is he too identified with Bush? Was the war in Iraq a mistake? Etc. They both are kind of unusual candidates. They cross-pressure independence in interesting ways. And I think this could be the year where the presidential debates really matter. There could be 15%, 20%, I think, of the electorate genuinely open to being persuaded by those debates. And I was talking with someone who's actually do part of one of these big independent expenditure ad campaigns, and I said, whatever you want, it's not my business, but intellectually I was thinking, it may be this year that those campaigns make less difference, because at the end of the day, if 80 million people are watching the debates, that's what people are going to believe. You see some 30-second ad, but if you watch for 90 minutes 2 candidates, if you watch them 3 times, that's really going to be important, I think, for independent voters. And we have seen this year already a great interest in the debates, even on the Democratic side. So I actually think this year could be the year where we really do have the debates becoming central. And McCain and Obama are both, what do you think, pretty good debaters? Neither's a great debater, I would say.
Obama's not a good debater because he disdains the convention. And McCain is not really, he didn't win any of the debates either. But, the other day in one of the Sunday shows, David Brooks, our colleague, had this great idea, I thought, which is to just mix up the whole debate format and make them play war games or something. Give them a scenario, like let's say this is happening in Iran and this is happening in Syria. The trouble with debates is they've been so neuter. They're barely even talking to each other, and then they repeat their speech chunks or their policies, and you don't learn anything new. I mean, that's why I kind of like the ABC when I thought I was learning something about Obama by seeing him under pressure. But it would be great if they could just completely throw out what they're doing, and we could see them thinking and how they think and how they would react to a situation like that. But I guess that'll never happen.
Well, I can't think of a better note to conclude our discussion by I've been saying we should look forward to the debate at Hofstra on October 15th to see what the presidential candidates say. We have a little bit of time for audience questions, and I think there are 2 mics up here. People want to come up and state your name and affiliation.
My name is Esther Confino. I happen to be very active for single-payer national health, universal health insurance, but this question doesn't relate to that. I noticed it seems that we have not been dealing with the race issue at all, and yet in recent days I have seen the results of some polls that were rather disquieting. Have you noticed that? That many people who were polled said they would not, under any circumstances, and it was a great number, vote for a black.
The poll I saw had 8% of the public, the whole public, saying they wouldn't vote for an African American, which is disquieting. Though actually it's lower than the number who have said in the past they wouldn't vote for a woman, or who certainly said they wouldn't vote for a Mormon in the case of Romney.
Yeah.
Now you don't know whether to believe these polls. People don't often volunteer that they, that they're unwilling to vote for people because of characteristics that are presumably illegitimate characteristics to make a judgment on. I don't know, though. We'll see. I mean, people might have said a long time ago that Obama couldn't get all these votes from whites, and he's gotten an awful lot of them in a lot of states that don't have big black populations, and that weren't on the forefront of the civil rights movement. So, I don't know. Honestly, one can say it's racial. It happens that Reverend Wright is black. The church he went to is mostly black. But we discussed Dukakis and Kerry. I think the problems with Obama are not race. To the degree that, first of all, Obama's been a fantastic candidate. He's probably going to be the Democratic nominee. So if this were a deeply racist country, I mean, he's doing awfully well. And secondly, I think the problems he's running into are really not race-based. They're more attitude,
You all thought so. I just was saying that I heard some results that were denied that, besides which the hidden agendas don't get talked about anyway.
There was an analysis, Adele, is this right, that gender helped her and race hurt him in Pennsylvania?
Yeah, a little bit. It's hard to know how, I think it's hard to know how to do
Also,
those
she
regressions.
uses gender more, and he tries to transcend race, although he does use it sometimes. But that's what's so interesting about the race.
Pennsylvania's a closed Democratic primary, so I don't know. I don't know that one party's more racist than the other, but people should be careful, I think, on the liberal side, frankly, about saying that race is hurting Obama, since you're saying that a bunch of Democrats are voting on racially bigoted grounds. This isn't the hated Republicans who are doing this, So, and I'm dubious that there was that much racial voting.
Also, it's interesting in the bitter comments, he was kind of trying to give people the benefit of the doubt. He was saying they're not racist, they have other, that's what got him into trouble.
Yes. It's okay. And he was such a gentleman, just...
Let me ask someone else.
Ms. Dowd, I just very taking off from the question here about whether the subtext of race has not been discussed in this country. It's nice to hear that both of you, very well informed commentators, feel that the United States has overcome the racial issue. And therefore we can talk about just the primary representatives like Obama and Clinton, and whether they're liked or not liked. The real question is, who do the American people like? And is racism not one who will choose?
Oh, I think we overcome the racial issue. I think it's huge. But that to me is what's so fascinating about this race, and it's an education for all of us. And it was interesting because the Wall Street Journal had a piece in South Carolina. The Obama campaign used Michelle Obama as much as possible because they felt that, and they were quoted saying this, that she had darker skin, and they didn't want people to think that Obama was somehow, married to a white woman, or, they wanted the black voters there to know that this was his wife. And so there are things that I didn't even know about that I'm seeing them do. And of course, it's, we haven't overcome it at all. That was what was so interesting about the race speech. That was one of the best speeches probably in political history, but it was also very elegant damage control. And I don't think he totally controlled the issue of Reverend Wright, because I don't think he yet understands why people are so upset about that, and that comes back to the patriotism thing.
Yeah, but that's because he said "goddamn America," not because he was a black pastor. I mean, I do think we both, I here disagree with both the questioner and I guess Maureen a little bit. I think we mostly overcome the issue of race in this country. I know it's not fashionable to say this, and we're supposed to say that we're supposed to indulge now in an endless national conversation and search our souls and all that. Most younger Americans, in my view, are not bigoted. Many older Americans are not bigoted. Some might have some sentiments that left over, but I think they mostly tried pretty hard to overcome them. And I just say, look around in America. I mean, who's the most popular TV personality in America? I believe Oprah Winfrey is. Who's the most popular, most popular athletes? Barack Obama is about to be nominated by one of the two major parties for president of the United States. I don't know. That strikes me as going pretty far towards overcoming race. All right, I think you can do a lot of... Racial progress doesn't correlate necessarily with the amount of conversation about race. Is one of these.
Hofstra alum and a retired American government teacher. Ms. Dowd, forgive me for asking, but I wonder why someone like you would take the time to ask the New York Times congressional correspondent what Senator Obama eats for breakfast under normal circumstance. The question goes to the idea of someone, a prominent journalist like yourself, focusing on issues like whether his eating waffles is a reflection of his true self, or whether he bowls adequately to be president of the United States.
Because I think the reason he lost the Pennsylvania primary is because he could not relate to white working class people. And the reason he could not relate is this low signaling thing, like they see him, and that's how you form impressions. The vote for president is the most personal vote of all. And you're forming impressions. Are they someone you can trust with the life and death issues? And, it seems trivial, but that is how you're forming impressions of people.
Those are the impressions that journalists like yourselves conveyed to the American public. If you didn't focus on it, we wouldn't know about it.
Yeah, I just fundamentally disagree with this reasoning, because it would be like when, people used to complain. Let's say I covered the W-Gore debate, right? So Gore messed up one of his debates because he was all in orangey makeup and he looked like a big orange candle, and he was sighing and rolling his eyes and getting into W space, and he just messed up. So I wrote a column saying he messed up. I can't not... people are going to see it on TV anyway. I could write a partisan column and defend him for messing up, but that isn't the kind of column I do. I write with how people are really coming across and how the reason why they might win or lose a certain primary or election. And in the case of Obama, he just was not able, he just was radiating kind of patronizing air. And I was curious, I wanted to report out why he acted so. I mean, to me, the greatest line of the Pennsylvania primary was when the reporter tried to ask about Jimmy Carter and Hamas, and he's like, why can't I just eat my waffle? It was so resonant and so full of his disgust that he is still having to deal with Hillary Clinton. So, metaphors, they work, I think.
Also, look, American politics has always been partly small politics. Small politics has been. Tippecanoe and Tyler, too, growing up in a log cabin. That happened long before modern media, the trivialities of TV, talk radio, or Maureen's columns. So, it's perfectly, obviously the politicians themselves have thought this is important. And it would be a little odd if columnists and journalists and TV commentators didn't talk about something that the politicians spend a huge amount of time thinking about, strategizing about, trying to control. But the other point I make, though, is, I mean, and here I'm sympathetic in a way, I mean, to the question, but I think that most voters do vote on ideology and issues. That's just empirically a fact. Most of the people in this room voted probably, those who voted Republican last time are going to vote Republican this next time. Those who voted Democrat last time are going to vote Democrat the next time. And the reason is because you basically agree with the Republican Party or the Democratic Party on a medley of foreign policy and domestic policy issues. So the fact that most voting is partisan voting would suggest that most voters mostly weigh issues, but all voters, especially for the presidency, I think Maureen's really right about this. If you're electing a congressman or a senator, you want someone who will kind of vote the way you want. If you're pro-life, you want a pro-life vote. If you're a low-tax person, you want a low-tax vote. You don't care that much about the character, the judgment, how they perform under stress. That's not what a congressman or senator is really there for. But for president, it's a more personal vote, so the personal character, judgment type issues weigh heavier, though the ideological issues remain very important. And for some voters, especially swing voters who are conflicted, you agree with McCain on one thing, you agree with Obama on another. Well, you don't quite know which, is healthcare more important than the war in Iraq? You're not certain. Maybe you make a cast a vote based on just general judgment. Does the guy seem smart? Does he seem to have good judgment? Does he seem to understand what people in the country are feeling? Those are legitimate grounds for people to weigh in to their voting, and they're legitimate grounds to write about for that reason.
Yeah, and also these are the emails that are coming from the Obama campaign. They are setting him up in these tableaus to present him a certain way, and then they email the reporters about what he ate and what he left on his plate. I'm not reporting this independently. These are the presentations of Obama from his own campaign, because they're trying to make him seem like he's relating more.
We don't have a lot of time, but I see how many questions are. I'll try to get in a few minutes.
Good afternoon. As a student here at Hofstra in a study group entitled Personal Enrichment in Retirement, we welcome you to the Hofstra community. Ms. Dowd, I am very concerned with using the power of the pen as an educational tool. And this is almost like a follow-up question to the gentleman who preceded me. I have been stunned by your articles in the New York Times in regard to Senator Clinton's campaign. I found yesterday's comments particularly repugnant. You say to Senator Clinton, go, go, go. Well, you alluded to it.
No, I didn't say that. I said if the Democrats want her to leave.
Well, you are in essence urging her to leave.
No, I was not. I was saying.
Well, I spoke to about 30 people. They all thought that was your intent.
Well,
but of course, my answer to that is stay, stay, stay.
Right, but I said, well, just do me the favor of at least accurately saying, I said if the Democrats want her to leave, they may have to sing the chorus from this Seuss thing. I didn't tell her to go. I want her to stay as long as possible because as a journalist, I find this race fascinating. And I agree with Bill. She has the right to stay. She's not that far behind him.
Basically, my question really has to do with, as I say, the power of the pen. And considering that we're on a university campus where hundreds of thousands of voters, Democrats, have been registered in the universities, I think it's very important that we recognize that. And I think it's a job of a journalist to point that out in one column particularly. The question is, isn't this a great example of participatory democracy? Do you feel that you have a responsibility as an eminent journalist to promulgate the right of candidates to continue through the primary season? You've just said that you do feel that way, but I don't read that in your comments.
Yes, well, you have to read the columns. I did a whole column about how Hillary, at the very least, had to get credit from the Democrats for toughening up Obama and for making him a better candidate, and that the longer she was in, the better that was for him. Now, at some point, you've got to figure out if that really is hurting the party and hurting him, but I agree with Bill. I don't think we're at that point yet.
My question is mainly for Ms. Dowd. As it becomes more evident during these primaries that both major candidates have serious defects or liabilities, to beat John McCain. Isn't it about time that some of the superdelegates began to think of a brokered convention? Think about somebody like Ben Nelson.
I'll just step into that question. So it's not going to happen. I mean, again, we don't tell the delegates what to do, but believe me, if one candidate gets 18 million votes and another gets 17 million votes, they're not going to nominate someone who didn't run. I mean, this is a democracy, and people have the sensible attitude in this day and age, unlike 60, 70 years ago at least, that one of the two front runners is going to win. So it's not going to be a broken convention. And I just want to say a word about this urging. I mean, we can urge people to do whatever we want. If I can urge Hillary Clinton to get out. It's not a violation of her right to keep running, to urge her to get out. And many Democratic election officials, I'm not business to do that because I don't, have a bunch of. It's not why I won't do it, but there are Democratic elected officials who've urged her to get out, and there are Democratic elected officials who've urged her to stay in. I mean, it's not unreasonable if you're a Democrat concerned about the well-being of the party at some point to say this is getting divisive, or don't run ads showing Osama bin Laden to try to tear down Obama. I myself think, as a practical matter, she has enough of a chance to win that she's going to stay in, and she'll make up her own mind, and we'll see what happens over the next 6 weeks. But there's been too much worrying in I mean, these politicians are pretty tough-minded. They really don't read Maureen's columns or listen to me on Fox News Sunday and say, oh my God, I hadn't thought of that. Bill Kristol disapproves of that. I better stop doing it. I found that happens surprisingly little, I gotta say.
Also, I think they're both much better candidates than Dukakis was and Gore was. So they're both, I don't think they're weak candidates. They're just, they're weakened by each other, but.
Last question.
Hello, my name is John Sprico, I'm a junior at Full Park Memorial High School. By the way, Ms. Dowd, you're spectacular today. My question is, in the recent days, Reverend Hagee has blamed the poor black population for Katrina. Why do you think the media is concentrated on Jeremiah Wright and Obama instead of Hagee and King?
Well, because John McCain has met Reverend Hagee once or twice, and Obama was a member of Reverend Wright's congregation for 20 years. Believe me, George W. Bush went to Bob Jones University once in 2000 and got grief, and I was one of those who gave him grief, making that his first stop in South Carolina. But he wasn't part of it. He met Bob Jones Jr. so far, I said, no, 3 times or something like that. So I think it's a pretty different level of relationship, but it's a fair enough point to make if you want to say that he's sort of an irresponsible and fellow, and I don't know much about him, but that McCain should have repudiated his endorsement more quickly. People have said that. The Democratic National Committee's put out statements like that. They've been reported, and he may end up paying some price for that. Or people might decide that, as Obama himself has said, I think it's more analogous to some of these people like Brzezinski or something who've endorsed Obama. He's met him twice, and Obama accepted the endorsement. Now, it's fair enough to say, well, why does someone like Brzezinski, if you don't agree with him on foreign policy, support Obama? But you can't really say that Obama is a close associate of Brzezinski any more than you can, I think, say McCain is a close associate of Reverend Hagee.
Please join me in thanking Maureen Dowd.